Social 20-1 Treaty of Versailles. This was the treaty negotiation they used to end World War One. Um, so the war ended in 1918, and the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles came out of 1919. So the treaty was an official document that decided what to do with whom after World War One. They built the treaty at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. At issue was, what do you do about Germany? How do we deal with Germany now that World War One has ended? So just that issue question alone tells you that they're going to blame Germany, and they have to decide what to do about German territory, German government, etc., etc. At stake is the map of Europe. Um, the German Empire is gone, the Russian Empire is gone, Ottoman Empire is gone, Austro-Hungarian Empire is gone. They're going to have to rework the map of Europe. Woodrow Wilson, representing America at that time, brought with him a list of 14 points. Not going to talk about all 14, but the big three of his 14 points, at least for our course, would involve the establishment of free trade. Self-determination is the big one in 20-1. That means letting countries have their own sovereignty, letting groups of people within an empire break away and declare sovereignty. They get their own political self-determination. And I'll show you how that works on a map in a few seconds. And the establishment of basic human rights. Nations that met at Versailles in 1919 all came with different motives. France and Britain wanted revenge. France and Britain, Clemenceau representing France, Lloyd George representing Great Britain, wanted to make Germany pay for World War One, both literally and figuratively. So they're going to blame Germany, and it's not fair. We need to establish that right now. It's unfair to blame just Germany for World War One. Any one of those countries could have put the brakes on and stopped the war. Um, Austria-Hungary was overly aggressive because of the German blank check. Russia was supporting Serbia. Britain was supporting Belgian neutrality. The French were supporting the Russians. Any one of those countries could have chosen not to honor the alliance, the Entente or the alliance, and stopped World War One in its tracks before it got going. But as we learned, nations wanted to go to war. They were well motivated for war. This was the peak of nationalism. They had invested millions of dollars in their militaries. And you need to understand that when you invest that kind of money in your military, that military's got a definite shelf life. The weapons, the munitions, the machinery you build might be relevant at present day, but 20, 30 years down the road, that weaponry you've spent so much money on is now antiquated and archaic. You can't even use it. So there was a rush, there was a need, there was a desire to go to war among all the nations involved. Wasn't fair that they're going to blame Germany for World War One. But as we studied, of the original Triple Alliance, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, Germany was the last country fighting from that side. So they're going to get the blame for World War One. Woodrow Wilson wants peace without victory. In other words, he wants to establish peace without being overly hard on Germany. Wilson's already thinking, if we're too tough on Germany right now in 1919, they could come back one day and they could want revenge. But he couldn't convince the British and the French to listen. And so they went off um, with the motive of revenge at the Treaty of Versailles. Here are some basic summary statements from the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is allowed an army no bigger than 100,000 men, which is really small. Don't forget that at this time, armies number in the millions of people, and they can't have an army bigger than 100,000 men. Basically, a glorified police force. They are allowed a navy of no more than 6 antiquated warships and no submarines at all. They cannot have an air force whatsoever. These are big deals. It might not seem like it to you, but Germany invested a lot of its identity in its military. And the Treaty of Versailles just said you basically can't have one. So it served to enrage and humiliate the Germanic peoples. And I don't blame them. The French get back Alsace-Lorraine, if you'll remember. The French lost Alsace-Lorraine after they lost the Franco-Prussian War to Germany in 1870. Germany lost all of its overseas colonies, which again seems a little too punitive. I mean, what did the colony really have to do with World War One? Well, nothing, but they're trying to punish Germany. The Rhineland was demilitarized. I'll talk about that in a minute and show it to you on a map. They are forbidden to unify with Austria. The thinking being that if they, and they're very similar people, culture, and so on. So unification would make sense between Germany and Austria. But the Allies don't want it because it upsets the balance of power. It makes Germany too strong if they unify with Austria. So that union, known as Anschluss, was forbidden. Germany needs to recognize the creation of new countries, Poland, Czechoslovakia. Some of these countries are created by taking Germanic land from Germany. So that would be a sore spot for Germans as well. And finally, Germany had to sign Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles, which basically said it was their fault for starting World War One. And as soon as you admit legally that something was your fault, you are on the hook for economic reparations. And so a reparation is money you have to pay to repair something. So basically, Germany is going to have to pay for World War One. They're going to have to pay Britain, France, the Allied countries back $33 billion. $33 billion in today's money would be about $400 billion. So it does again seem overly punitive on the Germans to have to do this. In the end, they only paid roughly $713 million of the reparations. In 1933, Hitler would rip up the Treaty of Versailles and cease all reparations back to the Allies. By the way, of that original $33 billion, 51% went directly to France. And so you can see why Germany would be upset about that too. So all of these um, facets of the Treaty of Versailles really did was humiliate and anger Germany. Ironically enough, the Treaty of Versailles was intended to prevent World War II. And when we look back at the way they punished Germany, we're going to see it's one of the causes of World War II. If there had not been a Treaty of Versailles, really good chance you never would have heard of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. But that's a story for another time. Here are those maps I was talking about. So there's Germany on the eve of World War One. Substantial empire. You've got a German empire, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Austria-Hungarian Empire, there's a Russian Empire, and down here there's actually going to be the Turkish Ottoman Empire. So that's the eve of World War One. There's Europe after World War One, after the Treaty of Versailles. So as you can see, Germany has lost territory. They've lost territory to help make the new countries of Poland and Czechoslovakia. So these are new countries coming out of the Treaty of Versailles. And these territories weren't made from complete German territory, but they took some territory from Germany to make Czechoslovakia and to make Poland. Here's the Rhineland that I was talking about. The Rhineland is to be demilitarized. It's a demilitarized zone. So the Rhineland is German soil, but Germany is forbidden to station troops on the Rhineland. The thinking being that if the Rhineland is demilitarized, France is now protected from future German aggression. If German goes after France again, they'll first have to go through the Rhineland, which will allow the French time to mobilize their force to fight off the Germans. Finally, down here is Alsace-Lorraine. That was taken from Germany and given back to France at the end of World War I at Treaty of Versailles. The Germans didn't think it was fair. But it wasn't just Germany that suffered at the Treaty of Versailles. Look what happened to the Empire of Austria-Hungary. So on the eve of World War I, Austria-Hungary was a kingdom. that was made up of Austrians and Hungarians, but also Ukrainians, Poles, Slovaks, Czechs, Balkan peoples, Slovenians, Croatians, the Serbians, the Romanians. So what you had in Austria-Hungary before World War One was a series of nations within a nation. Woodrow Wilson wanted those nations within a nation to have self-determination. So if Woodrow Wilson got his way at the Treaty of Versailles, all of these little nations, these little ethnicities, would get their own little countries. They would get their sovereignty. They don't really get it after the Versailles negotiation. So you can see new countries created after the Treaty of Versailles. The Balkan countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria-Hungary are now two different nation states, no longer an empire. What they did was they took a lot of the Balkan peoples down here and they jammed them together into what became known as Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, and so on. So while it's not complete self-determination, you know, all of these little guys didn't get their own territory, but some of them did. It's not complete self-determination. This is better than what they had before. At least now they've got a sovereign nation state and they're not part of the Empire of Austria-Hungary. So Wilson didn't completely get his way. He got part of his way. And down here you can see the disintegration of the old Ottoman Empire. So no more Ottoman Empire, no more Austro-Hungarian Empire, no more German Empire. There's really no more Russian Empire either. It becomes the Soviet Union. You learn more about that in grade 12. But that is the new map of Europe after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles.